All right, let's take a look inside Paleontology, which is from The Good and the Beautiful. This is one of their science unit studies, and it's geared for grades 3 through 8 to be done family style. Now, I was a little nervous about this one, and so I read through almost all of the content, all of the pages and all of the books, and which I don't always do. Sometimes I share things like because we've started them already, but we haven't finished them yet. Or sometimes I share things just that I've got on hand that I want to show you what they look like inside. But because I have some really strong beliefs about dinosaurs, the way that most of them died, and the earth and the creation and all that stuff, my antenna was definitely up on this, and I know that I would want someone to let me know what the content is before I got it, so I figured I would share with you what I found in here. Now, I also have these two recommended read-along books. There's The Ultimate Dinosaur Guide and then Ancient Animals. And what I would say, just as an overview if you're curious, is that I did find a couple things that were mildly concerning, but I didn't find anything that was so bad that it would stop me from using it with my sons. And I was expecting to not be able to use it with my son. So I was pleasantly surprised that it was more neutral than I expected. I would say, though, that I'm a little bummed because I feel like they missed an opportunity to explain that the global flood is a mechanism for how different things have come to be, including fossils and the dirt layers and everything like that. They do say about, well, these layers are put down first and then the other layers are put on top of them and over time and blah, blah, blah. And yes, some layers are put with time in between, but a lot of the layers were laid down really fast during Noah's flood. And that's shown in many ways, like the fact that the geological column is not located anywhere in the world in all of its correct order, or things like petrified forests where they're standing up on end through many layers. Same thing with in the ocean. They found a whale that was buried in diatoms. And, the scientists have figured out, oh, well, they accumulate this many inches per this many thousands of years or whatever. So to be this thick, it would have to be that many millions of years. But the whale is not going to be standing upright, not getting eaten or, wasting away over that amount of time. So there's enough evidence that, yes, things have been laid down, fossilization happened, obviously, but that it didn't necessarily happen over millions of years or even thousands or hundreds of years, that it can happen quickly, including they found artifacts of things that have been fossilized, modern day things that have been fossilized. So the process can happen a lot quicker if it's under the right conditions. And the global flood would have given it just such a right condition for things like that to occur. And same thing with the ice. There didn't have to be a separate ice age. People can believe that, but you can also see that in the flood that the ice would have been attracted to the poles because it's magnetic, and that's why the ice is thickest there. When you see woolly mammoths that are frozen in a running position, flash frozen, not just, fossilized there, but actually flash frozen to where their meat is still fresh and people have been able to eat mammoth meat, it shows that it had to be at the right temperature to freeze all the way through the animal quickly. And that temperature would match the temperature of space, which is where some of this water would have been coming down from. So all that to say, look into this stuff. If you haven't heard things like this before, that's great. Look into it. And this curriculum didn't introduce any of these ideas. And so I think it was just a missed opportunity to encourage our kids in their faith and in the truth and the evidence that's out there that very rarely is put forth. But it was neutral, and I guess on that end, people that have different beliefs probably would be comfortable with using it. And it was refreshing that they didn't have things like billions of years in it. They had a couple other phrases and things that were a little bit concerning, but again, nothing that I couldn't talk through with my kids and overlook for the benefits of the program. So I'm going to give you a flip through of all of these, as well as pointing out my few concerns that I have with it. And I hope this is helpful to you if you're choosing what curriculum to use. Time for a real page turner. So I'll do my best to get to the point, to show you what this unit study looks like, and then also to point out what my concerns in it are, so that you can see if it's a good fit for your family or not. We're going to start with the unit study itself and the student journal. You can get both of these either printed or you can get them as a PDF. For a PDF, the student journal is $10. The course book is $20. And they have 2 student journals. This one is for grades 3 through 6. There's also a 7th and 8th grade one. And from my understanding, from what I've seen in the past, the 7th and 8th has the same pages as the 3 through 6, but then it also has these additional pages for their lesson extensions. At the beginning, it explains how the unit is going to be set up. There are these icons that you'll see throughout each lesson, which is super helpful because it lets you know what's coming up in that lesson. And this is just saying that they recommend these 2 read aloud books, but if you're in 7th and 8th grade, they recommend that you get this other book, and it talks about how you will have other activities that you're doing if you're a little bit older. Then here's a list of supplies that you'll need for this study. I really like any study that you can do as a family unit study. That is so helpful to be able to talk about things together and do it as a family. Here are the vocabulary words. So these will be hung up on a wall, and it will let you know exactly when to put these on your wall. All right, so let's take a look at lesson 1. You can see here that there's not any prep work going on. It gives you an overview of what they want you to teach the child, and it gives you exactly what to say. There are a few videos, maybe like 4 or 5 throughout this study, and they'll let you know when one of those comes up that you can watch. In this one, they're showing different archeological sites, and then there are these letters that are written in blue, and they correspond in the student journal to lesson 1, where you'll fill in those letters, and it will let you know what the first discovered dinosaur is. Okay, so that was it for lesson 1. Let me flip through this just a little bit more so that you can see what other lessons might look like. Here it shows some sites where they've discovered fossils. Here it talks about how fossils are formed. The pictures in here are great quality, just like all the other Good and Beautiful Science Unit studies are. Now, I found that overall this study did focus on the actual work of finding fossils, the actual work of archaeology, and did a good job of staying fact-based with things. There were a few things that were concerning, though, and I'll just let you know a few of them. In the first video, it did mention about layers being formed over time, which if you've seen any sort of flood, you know that layers can happen quickly. And also just looking at the petrified forests that are standing upright, you'll see that things can be laid down very quickly as far as that goes. So not everything happens in layers, slowly over time. One thing that was concerning in chapter 6, one of the main concerns to me is here where it says the hip socket was adapted to allow for upright walking. So the eyes were adapted to water, etc. Scales are adapted to underwater. So I do not believe in adaptation in this sort of context. To me, that is design, and it clearly shows that there was a designer. Adaptation to me would be something like a salmon that goes from freshwater into saltwater and back to freshwater and is able to survive in those environments. They are adapting to a different environment. But this, your hip doesn't just decide to function in a completely different way. That's not an adaptation. That would be a completely different design. But that is one of the common words that is used right now when talking about evolutionary processes. Another thing was here where they said that this croc was prehistoric, which I don't believe in before history. Prehistoric would be before history. And the Bible clearly states how the world was started. We have early history. There's plenty of artifacts and other things to mark human and animal life all through the years that we've been here. Okay, but like I said, very minimal. There are a few phrases here and there that were a little concerning, but those were probably the most concerning things. But they did point out some of that inconsistency, which I appreciated. For example, here they showed how scientists used to believe that the spike was on the nose, but now they believe the spikes were on the legs. So I do appreciate that it points out that the scientific thought is changing and things that they once thought were true are not true. And so that was good. Okay, on to the student journal. This is where activities and experiments will be kept. Here they'll be cutting out these cards and then reading the description to put them where they belong. There was a neat one here where they're excavating a cookie, getting the chocolate chips out of it and just showing how painstaking it would be. And here they're going to be, while they're watching the video, filling out information about the archaeological site. So there were some really interesting things. Oh, I loved this project too. This artifact analysis was really interesting. So in here, there's a story in lesson 10 about an artifact that was found. So it starts showing the artifact and then it goes through and keeps giving information. And then they prompt you to go in here and fill out certain things as you're learning information about it. And at the end, you discover what you think the artifact is. So I thought that was a really fun activity for the kids to do. So some good looks at paleontology itself and archaeology. Okay, and let's take a look at the two reader books that go along with the 3rd through 6th grade. First is Ancient Animals. Now, I feel in general like a lot of the stuff in here is conjecture. It might say things like how they hunted for food or some sort of guess around their behavior. And I think we just have to be careful with things like that, that we don't get married to an idea that is assumed. But it did have good pictures in it, even though they are artist renderings. Like right here, this is what was discovered. Here's the artist rendering. So it's a lot of made up information alongside actual found information, which I think you'll have with just about any book that you have on fossils or dinosaurs or anything like that. It does not say things like millions of years or anything like that, but it also doesn't say anything about the way that the flood could have been the mechanism for the fossils that we see. So I feel like there, again, was a missed opportunity there. Well, I hope this was a helpful look inside these books for you and helps you to know if this is going to be a good fit for your family or not. Remember that real life is messy and beautiful and better with books. Science studies that they have for families, and it's geared for grades 3 through 8. And it's done family style, obviously, because I just said that. Okay, we'll try that again. What are those things called? Buried in, but that is one of the hot words. And what you think the artifact is. So that was good.